with more of our coverage of tonight's forum among Republican candidates for Kentucky governor.
Yeah, the 90-minute forum covered a range of topics and was filled with sparks and jabs among the candidates. WKYT's Chad Hedrick is back now to walk us through some of the more fiery moments from tonight. Chad.
Yeah, a lot of moments to choose from for sure as the candidates threw around accusations about ethics, fundraising, supporting former President Trump, just to name a few that we heard tonight. Things got heated during a discussion of supporting law enforcement as well. Kelly Craft saying Daniel Cameron does not have confidence in the Louisville Metro Police Department, referring to a U.S. Attorney General Merrick Garland's investigation into civil rights violations that were related to the Breonna Taylor case. Eric Dieters called out all of the candidates for not supporting former President Trump enough in the 2020 election. Here's just a bit of the exchanges that went on for several minutes tonight.
Let's talk about the Attorney General appreciating Merrick Garland coming into Louisville, this woke DOJ, allowing Merrick Garland by saying, I appreciate him being here. I appreciate the fact that he's going to now oversee the Louisville Metro Police Department. What does that say about backing the blue?
Kelly's been sitting with law enforcement and has got one to openly and publicly support her. I've got over 100 law enforcement officials that have supported and endorsed this campaign for governor. I'm going to continue to fight for them, whether Kelly Craft spends $10 million attacking me or not.
Do you believe that President Trump won the 2020 election?
Absolutely. I'm the only person on this stage who says they stole it.
But
I've not been silent for 4 years. I've been leading a community in Kentucky, talking about Kentucky issues. Look,
not defending Trump.
We can fight over Donald Trump and Mitch McConnell all we want. I look for a day when we don't wait for crumbs from Washington to come and save us. You know, quite honestly, the last 10 minutes are why people are sick of politics in America.
But the answer to the question is yes or no.
President Biden's our president.
Did President Biden win the election fair and square?
I know that Donald Trump won big in Kentucky, and that I think that there's reason to question some of the things that we saw in various cities around the United States.
And the spars between the candidates started well before the back and forth that you saw there. Today, candidate Eric Dieters filed a lawsuit challenging Kelly Craft's residency, claiming she does not meet the Kentucky citizenship requirements to run for governor, saying she's legally a resident of Oklahoma. Craft denies this, saying she was born, raised, and went to school in Kentucky, and added she was vetted by federal officials as a Kentucky resident. Amber.
Chad, thank you. And WKYT and Gray Television will host the Kentucky debate next Monday, May 8th. It will be at Transylvania University at 7. We are still awaiting confirmation from some of the candidates who were invited. Primary election day, by the way, is Tuesday, May 16th.